What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the YBA. Now, the other day I released about an hour and a half long tutorial and I used this haircut as an example for some of the clips. I wasn't really talking about that haircut specifically. So today we're gonna crawl through this. I'm gonna break every point down. This is a thorough instructional video. So if you guys are just looking for some like passive entertainment, this probably ain't for you. This is for the barbers. This is why it is called the YBA. So with that being said, we're gonna go through my 6-phase approach. I'm gonna show you how I break this down, and we're gonna talk a little bit about my faded acronym. Before we get started, I just wanna shout out the sponsors of today's video. That sponsor is Booked In. Booked In is a booking application that makes it super easy for you guys to schedule your appointments. It's brought me a lot of peace. It's lowered my anxiety. I love working by appointments, and I really haven't heard like a good argument not to use appointments. So if you guys wanna check out the link in the description, it is bookedin.com/Eddie, and they are now offering you guys 50% off your first 3 months. So take advantage of the offer. Shout out to the sponsor. Really appreciate you guys. Now let's get into this tutorial. The very first part of this haircut, you're gonna notice that I'm combing it out and I'm looking for difficult spots. All right, so the first thing I did was F, find out what the client wants, and then A, analyze the hair. I'm looking for growth patterns. I'm looking for things that don't lay right, and then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get started in my phase 1. So phase 1 is just removing bulk. And the way that I chose to do that was with my instinct clipper. I put it in the closed position and I set my original first guideline in. This is a really soft and easy way to set your guideline in, and this is going to make removing that guideline much easier. If your tools are not set up correctly, you are 100% going to struggle. And I would really encourage you watch the entire lesson where I got into that. I'm not gonna get into that too much here, but I'm just saying you're probably going to wanna have a soft set trimmer. That's gonna make life a little bit easier. In the very next step, I'm going to take my trimmer up to my closed taper line. So I have my closed taper line right here, and I have my trimmer. I'm going to come very close to the closed taper line, and I'm gonna stop shortly before I get there. You're going to notice that I'm flicking up and away. Now, that's part of that lift, tip, and flick that we covered in the previous video, but essentially what I'm trying to do is create no line between my closed taper and my trimmer. And I do have the clipper zero gapped, and it's designed to cut really close. So the gap that I'm making here, it's a very small jump from trimmer to closed taper, and it's going to make this really easy. There's something really smooth and really good about using that Cyborg trimmer. I'm not 100% sure what it is. Maybe it's the digital brushless motor. Maybe it has to do with the metal housing. Maybe it's the blade. Pairing all those together makes this an incredibly smooth machine for removing bulk, especially with how I have it set. So typically I will remove most of my bulk with that. Now, the next step that we're gonna be doing here is we're gonna be using our electric shaver. So now I'm gonna turn this into my trimmer line, and I'm going to be using my shaver underneath. You guys will notice that I'm using the Uno 2.0 single foil electric shaver. And that's because I kept the fade a little bit lower around the sides. I don't wanna put in I don't wanna make a mistake with a large shaver at this point. I wanna be able to actually see what I'm doing and really get in there and finesse those details, because my goal is to not create any line in between my skin area and my trimmer. And once I've done that, I'm completely set with phase 1. Now, phase 1 just means to remove the bulk, so phase 1 is done. And in this case, when I did this haircut, I wanted to leave more hair on top, so I'm gonna jump over to phase 3, which is how I'm going to cut the top. We're gonna break this down super thorough, and then we're gonna go back to phase 2, which is actually clipper over comb, which is how I started to build the connection into the top. Now, one of the reasons why typically I would do clipper over comb first is because I'm gonna remove some of the hair that I would otherwise have to cut with the scissors. I'm making it less work, and it's taking me less time. Okay, so what you're going to see me do, standing off to the side of the client, I'm gonna set in my mohawk guideline. Notice that I combed the bangs out and away, so if this is the guy's nose, and then I'm putting in a mohawk guideline. So what I'm going to do is I'm creating a stationary guideline in the center of the head. A lot of barbers that teach online, they really overcomplicate this. They make this seem like this is something really difficult to do. You really got to get your shear game up and all this stuff. And I'm here to tell you, it's really simple. If it was difficult, there wouldn't be so many barbers. And I'm going to show you guys a system that just works extremely well. So you'll notice that I'm picking up my guideline and I'm working just off to one side. It really wouldn't make a difference what side. So here's my guide. It's already been cut, and I'll just put a couple X's here to show that it's already been cut. And all I'm doing is lifting up a horizontal section here, and you can see what needs to be cut. I'm not worried about going down here yet or any of that stuff, and I'm just gonna stick to that guide. I have that stationary guide, but as I cut, I'm going to start to develop a bit of a traveling guideline. So as long as we keep the sections no wider than the width of our comb, you're going to notice that you're going to have a very accurate cut. You're going to be able to see both your traveling and your stationary guideline, which is going to enhance the accuracy of this cut. So as I begin doing this all the way down, moving away in sections on both sides, it's just going to expand the guideline itself. So there's something that you want to keep in mind here. Whenever you're doing the top of a men's haircut, most of the time you're cutting it at 90 degrees. That just means straight out from where it grows. So if I take a line here and I pull it straight out from where it grows, that's 90 degrees. It doesn't matter where I do that, right? But if I'm lifting up hair from here and directing it all the way over there, picking up big sections is not necessarily a bad thing, and it doesn't mean that you're gonna make a mistake. But what it does mean is when this hair comes back, well, guess what? It's gonna be way longer. So because you've over-directed it off of its base. And that's why it was really important back in barber school when you guys were learning how to section the hair. That was what that was designed to do, to get you to understand where the hair grows. So that's what the sectioning portion was about. And I know a lot of you guys were complaining like, I don't want to do this. I'm a barber. I don't want to cut long hair. So you're the type of barber that just kind of runs out the shop when you see a long hair client come in. I know there's a few that are watching. So just stay with me here. If I was to pick up this whole big section, the only hair that's being cut to 90 degrees is that about the width of the comb, right? So even if I picked up a big section like that, which I easily could, I could pick up a big section alongside of it, direct all that hair, and little by little, I will get it all. Now, this really couldn't be any easier. So notice how I left the bangs out. We're gonna address them right now. I'm gonna comb the bangs down just straight, because I know this client wears his bangs up and back off of his head. So he's not really gonna be too concerned about that being perfect. But if he wakes up in the morning and his hair is going forward and I left a few long ones, that's not a good look for you, and that's not a good look for me as the barber, right? So I'm gonna comb that hair down and I'm gonna make a 0 cut. So this is just like back in barber school when you did your blunt cut. All I did was comb that down. Now this is how I'm gonna address the top. I'm gonna actually be using pie sections. I've already cut the interior of my hair. All this hair is cut properly, and the bangs are long, and that area that led into them is probably long as well. So what we need to do is think of this more as blending into our 0 guideline from our interior guideline. So if you look at me right now, I'm showing you guys the interior and I'm connecting it to the exterior. Now, the big principle here, I've already cut the 0 line on the bangs. So all I'm doing is connecting from the interior to the exterior. There might be times where you have to angle the comb up to make that connection to blend it in. There's gonna be some times where it'll just go off straight, and there's gonna be some times where you cut the bangs so short that there is nothing to do in that section, in which case you can just do the entire thing to 90 degrees. Now, I cut the hair standing directly behind the client, horizontal sections. When I do that, I need to cross-check. So I'm going to stand off to the side, and I'm gonna pick up a few sections, and don't be alarmed if you have some mistakes. This is why we check. We make mistakes and we check it. So your first cut, kind of like your rough draft. Going through, checking it, now you have your final, and we know the top is perfect. So let's go ahead and we'll jump into phase 2, which is clipper over comb. So in this particular situation with clipper over comb, I didn't have to use it. I could have used guards for this, but I knew that it was gonna speed me up. I knew that it was gonna help me blend into the top and avoid some of the different holes and stuff that the client might have in their head. Some people's head shapes are a little bit different, and this can allow you to make a nice graduated blend into the top without necessarily getting in there, cutting a bunch of holes, or making a bunch of mistakes. So all I'm going to do is literally set the comb in, tip it out on the angle I want, and begin making that blend. Less is more, and you'll notice that I'm actually using the pencil grip right now, and little by little I'm looking in the mirror. I'm not moving super fast. When you guys see me, like when I really need to get things done, you're gonna see me moving really quick. I've mastered this technique. I'm really good at doing this, but if you haven't, don't feel the need to rush. Don't feel the need to move fast. Cut a little bit, step back and look. Cut a little bit, step back and look. And of course, we are going to refine this with some shear over comb towards the end of the haircut. So as you can see, one of the areas this can be really helpful is usually in the crown. Now the crown is usually full of colics or bad growth patterns or just weird stuff. And that's where you could really say, okay, this is where I need my blend to end. And that's why I like using this clipper over comb, because we haven't really started removing that line yet. We haven't really got into the blend yet, and we're about to, but I want to know where am I actually starting from and where am I ending. So now that I've isolated that parietal ridge area and it looks good and it's looking pretty smooth, now I can get into my blend and I know I need to get it done before I reach that area. So that's kind of the whole key right there. And you could of course move up the comb horizontally. You could hold it in there on a diagonal and that could help to blend. Whatever you got to do to get it in there. And if there's somebody out there, they're like, yo, what type of combs do you use? I really do like these Zuka combs. They're very flexible, they're very wide, and they make it just kind of really easy for me to kind of maneuver around the head. The only thing I'm gonna say on the comb is I really don't wanna see too much, I really don't wanna see too many teeth on the comb because sometimes that can make it hard to lift up. And we really wanna focus on the bottom part of the comb. That's the only area of the comb that's being directed out to 90 degrees, tension free. So, with that being completed, we're gonna jump into our phase 4, the blend, and we're gonna talk about a little clipper manipulation that's gonna have you speeding up through some of these guidelines and making it a lot softer and easier to remove. Notice how I'm just showing you guys how I tip the clipper out. I'm gonna tip the clipper out and I'm gonna set in my first open taper guideline. So the very first part of this process is I'm tipping the clipper out and I'm just using the teeth to begin that part of the blend. What that's gonna do is that's gonna really soften these upper guidelines and that's gonna make blending the rest of this out really easy. So as I work my way through this section, you're going to notice that I start to lower the butt end of that clipper down and I get a true open taper guideline, which is actually even a little softer than an open taper towards the top, but it's going to begin my blend for me and it's going to make things easier. Now, if you guys are inadvertently manipulating your clipper, that's probably where you're making some mistakes. You need to know why you're doing certain things. Now, when your blade is held flat up against the side of the head, that's when it's actually going to cut its closest, right? So if I'm tipping it out like this, I might be inadvertently manipulating it. But when I hold it out like this, I'm actually going to create more space. I'm going to leave the hair longer. This is typically done with the clipper in the open position. And yes, you can kind of do this even with some guards on it to some extent. But for the most part, we're gonna reserve it for this area right here. Now, when I begin blending, you're also going to notice that I'm gonna keep this clipper tipped a little bit sideways as I begin my blend. That's gonna reduce the amount of errors and that's gonna make your blend come out easier. If I go up with my clipper like completely horizontal and flat and make a mistake, well, guess what? You just made a mistake about 1.5 inches long instead of making a very small mistake with a few teeth. So this is one of the reasons why I typically tend to do that. So now, before we start any of the real blending, we're gonna put in a few more guidelines. I like to kind of save this towards the end because I know I'm gonna be able to get this out easily. So what I'm really trying to concentrate on his haircut with blonde hair, it can be really difficult to get a nice connection in the parietal ridge. If I was to take a number 1 up the side of his head, like really high, he would look bald. We don't want that to happen. So with that being said, I'm actually gonna strap on a number 2. I'm gonna actually open my clipper all the way and I'm gonna begin using my C motion. This is clipper manipulation 101 here. So C motion, just softening my blend. I did the rest of that clipper over comb. So this should actually work out pretty good. Now I might have to move it sideways, maybe use 1 or 2 of the teeth and work it in, but I like what I'm seeing. So we're gonna continue the down fading process and I'm gonna put a 1 1/2 tight guard on there. And what I typically like to do, the moment I begin actually blending, I'm gonna move this 2 clicks open. So first, I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna use it open completely, and then we're about to start our actual blending right now, and you're gonna see that I rarely will touch the clipper horizontally. I will almost always be using it on an angle as you see me doing right now. So now we're gonna go ahead and we can do a little lever play because this is gonna be the first part of our blend. So you'll notice that I'll go from halfway to completely closed, and I'm just trying to find different angles and different ways to chip into that number 2 guard where I went previously. So now that we got that done, we're gonna begin really the first part of our blend that gets a little more difficult, and that's with the number 1. So you'll notice that I just went 2 clicks open. I call this the 2 click and flick. So I'm either using only one part of the blade, I'm only laying one part of the blade down, so it might look like I'm holding it kind of horizontally, but I'm actually only using one or the other side of the blade. Sometimes you'll see it on an angle, but I gotta tell you guys something really important here. The best barber tool you could possibly have is your eyes. They're what's gonna tell you where you need to go and what you need to do next. So as I'm doing this, I could open the taper, I might close the taper a little bit. It's all based upon what I'm seeing with my eyes. So if I look at this section and let's say, like currently right now, I actually like how it's looking. But let's say I see something that, you know what, I think I should go back in there with the 1.5 tight guard on there. I might do that. You know, I like to make sure that I catch my mistakes early and fix them before I move into my next step. So now we're getting down to probably the most difficult guideline to work out. but it won't be difficult if you executed your phase one correctly. So we'll begin with the clipper 2 clicks open, and I'm gonna start chipping into it on an angle. I might open it or close it as needed, but I'm gonna keep going until I wipe out this entire closed taper guideline, and now you're gonna start to see the blend is really going to come together. So another thing I want to point out, you notice that I did skip the half guard. I have no interest in using much of the half guard, and you're gonna see I'm actually going to use a taper blade. We talked about this in the previous video, how important it is to have your setup correctly. So a taper blade is gonna help me hit most of the lengths that a half guard would help me hit. And having the taper blade and the vapor blade and using them at the right time together creates a really good recipe for some really easy blending. So if you don't have a taper blade, I would definitely encourage you to grab a clipper and put a taper blade on one, or just buy one that has one on it already. Currently, I'm using the Cyborg, and I'm working my way through it with the Cyborg. Now, you might look at this and think, if you're newer, you might look at this and think, God, that blend looks like it's kind of done on that side. And looking in the camera, I could definitely say I kind of feel the same way, like looking at what I see right now. On the left side of his head, it looks like it's done. But the truth is, it's not really done, and my perspective where I'm standing, I could see there's still a couple imperfections there that I want to work out. So I'm going to actually go back to my soft set trimmer, and I'm just using a few teeth, and I'm going to chip into my closed taper area. That's a pretty normal thing to have to do. If you've executed a perfect phase one, there's a pretty good chance you might not even have to do this, but you're almost never going to execute a perfect phase one. So you can use your soft set trimmer, and if that doesn't work, you can go back with your zero gap trimmer, and you can eliminate any type of line that you have there. So once this is all complete, the very last step of our blend is we are going to put the half guard on. I'm going to set it to 2 clicks open, and I'm going to begin kind of playing with the lever. Now remember, the half guard closed is actually going to cut shorter than an open taper, and the half guard open is actually going to leave the hair a bit longer than a number 1 in the closed position, which means that the only real value in the half guard is about at halfway open or thereabouts, just a little bit in between there. Now, as you guys can see, this blend is coming out quite nice. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to jump over to my zero gap pair of trimmers, and any other little imperfections I'm going to do, and I'm also going to execute the lineup. So I've not even done shear over comb. I haven't used my texturizing shears or any of that stuff. So right now I'm looking at this blend, and I'm pretty happy with what I see, and I know that I'm only going to be able to further refine it with some shear over comb a little bit later down in the video. One of the last things I'm going to do before I leave this side is I'm going to pick up my taper blade. I'm just using 1 or 2 of the corners. This is going to give me a super soft effect, and it'll really help me kind of blur out any other little imperfections. Jumping between your half guard and your open taper with your taper blade on there, it's really going to help you to just get these blends to lay down perfect. So I'm going to pretty much skip this other side. We're just going to kind of repeat this other side, just showing you guys kind of the hair is different on both sides of the head. And in our faded acronym, it's really important that we do that analyze phase. I'm looking for light spots. I'm looking to see if the hair is thin on one side, or I'm looking for the curl, or I'm looking for maybe a bald spot that's not visible when you had all that hair long. The last thing you want to do is shave off the side of somebody's head and realize, oh my God, there's a problem there. So we want to get ahead of these things. We want to make sure that we catch them before we get to that point, and that way we're not going to be making any big mistakes. So after knocking out my blend on this side, I've already handled phase 4. I handled phase 3. I've already cut the top. Now we're technically into phase 5, which is just the edge up, which is going to be pretty minimal on this client because he doesn't wear a total edge up, but we are going to do a hard part here. Before I do that, I want to just use my shear over comb method while the hair is still damp, and I'm going to go through and just make little refinements to the hair. I'm going to do this both while it's damp, and then I'm going to dry it, and I'm going to do it one more time just to make sure that I've got it perfect. So as you guys can see, I'm really taking off a very little amount of hair. I'm looking for like curls that are not laying right, or like little thick spots that I may have left, and I'm going to be able to take care of that with the shear over comb method. So it's a lot like clipper over comb. I'm holding my comb the same way, and I'm paying attention to the hair at the very bottom of the comb. That's being directed out to 90 degrees, and it's tension free, which means that that's the way the hair is actually going to lay, and that means that I'm going to actually have a really nice haircut at the end of the day by doing this. It's better than using the finger and shear method to try to blend that out. Now I'm going to pick up my zero gap trimmers, the ones that cut the absolute closest, and I'm going to hit the line both directions. You need to be careful of how you lay your trimmer down. If you lay your trimmer down and this butt end is too close to the scalp, what that does is that's bringing the cutting blade very close to the hair, and that could cause you to cut a patch into that. We don't want to do that. So I want to have this angled almost perfectly straight up and down, and then I will do it on the opposite side of that line, making the line perfect on both sides, which of course we're also going to use a little bit of shaving cream and follow up with our razor. And then the last step that I like to do is I like to take my shears, just using the inside of my shears, I like to knock out any little hairs from the previous hard part. Like when the client styles their hair, they're going to see a couple little hairs sticking out sometimes. So I like to get them as short as possible before I send them out of the shop. Now, comes for the most important part, and the part that I don't really include in a lot of my lessons because I don't feel like a lot of you guys even care about styling, but I actually am going to style his hair up. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my blow dryer and I'm going to turn it up to the hottest setting, and I'm going to get this hair moving in the direction that I want. I want to create some volume in the front, and I want to just make sure that I'm giving the client about as much heat as I can give him without burning him, and then I'm going to hit my cool button to set it into place. This will reduce the amount of product that I have to put in his hair to get the style that I want, and it's going to help his hair really lay and direct in the position that I want it to. A lot of you guys don't really understand what the cool button is for. We give the client high heat in whatever direction you're trying to put the hair, and then hit the cool button and hold it down, and that's what's going to set it in place. And with that being said, when we go to style it with our products, it's going to be just that much easier. So I'm actually going to be using a Johnny B product called Hold Up, and I've been using this a lot. I really like this. It doesn't create like a really wet look. It actually is a pretty dry kind of style, and it really gives a nice showing to all the texture that I put into his haircut. So we're going to go through with the texturizing shears at this point. The texturizing shears can be used to reduce bulk without affecting length, and also to relax a curl. And in this case, the very front of his hair has got kind of like a funky curl pattern. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to make sure that I got all that laying just right. And then I'm also going to repeat some of my shear over comb work, but I'm just going to do that with my texturizing shears or my actual shears. If you notice, I didn't dive in there and do a whole bunch of texturizing shears right off the bat. A lot of barbers do that, and that's going to remove a ton of the bulk, and we don't really want to do that. I actually like to use my actual shears to do that, and then I will go back and make whatever refinements necessary with my texturizing shears to finish that up. So with that being said, this pretty much wraps up the haircut. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys can check out the final style right here. And this is the YBA. Subscribe for more content like this. This will probably be a member-only video in the future, but for a limited time, I'm going to leave it available for the public. And if you guys need to buy anything from Gamma, you guys can use my code Eddie, save 15%. If you need to buy anything outside of Gamma, you guys could use my friends over at Williamsport Barber Supply. Use the code Eddie10 and save 10%. You will find links down below for everything I used. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.